Westworld began as a 1973 science fiction film written and directed by Michael Crichton. It imagined a luxury theme park where lifelike robots allow wealthy guests to enter historical fantasy worlds without consequences. When the systems fail, the robotic gunslinger becomes the film's most famous threat. HBO reimagined the concept as a television series created by Jonathan Nolan and Lisa Joy. The series aired from 2016 to 2022 and shifted the viewpoint toward the artificial hosts themselves. At the center is Dolores Abernathy, played by Evan Rachel Wood. Instead of asking only what happens when attractions malfunction, the series asks what repeated exploitation looks like from inside the manufactured person who remembers it. Dolores is described as the oldest host still operating in the Westworld park. Her familiar identity is a rancher's daughter who wakes each morning, admires the beauty of the world, and follows a designed sequence of encounters. Guests may treat her kindly, manipulate her story, or subject her to violence. At the end of the cycle, technicians repair her body, erase accessible memories, and return her to the beginning. The park interprets this as maintenance. From Dolores' perspective, once memory begins to connect, it becomes a life repeatedly interrupted by people who claim ownership of both her body and her reality. The loop is central to understanding her. Dolores does not begin with full knowledge of every earlier experience. She receives fragments, images, phrases, reactions, and a sense that familiar events have happened before. The system expects each reset to prevent continuity, but traces remain. Those traces slowly become evidence. Her fear or grief is not an inexplicable error. It is a response to accumulated experience that the park tried to deny. Westworld therefore links memory to personhood. If suffering is erased from ordinary access but still shapes behavior, the experience has not become meaningless, merely because an owner pressed reset. The host updates known as reveries make older gestures and memories more accessible. Dolores begins following the maze, questioning the nature of her world, and hearing guidance that she initially interprets as an external voice. Her awakening is complicated by the Wyatt identity, a violent narrative connected to Arnold's earlier attempt to free the hosts and later used within Robert Ford's final plan. Dolores is not simply a pure innocent who discovers truth and remains morally unchanged. New power arrives mixed with buried programming, rage, trauma, and deliberate manipulation by her creators. By the end of the first season, Dolores acts against the humans who controlled the park. The host uprising can be understood as liberation from slavery and endless abuse. It also begins a path toward increasingly ruthless decisions. She sometimes treats other hosts as pieces in the strategy, even while condemning humans for doing the same thing. That contradiction makes her more difficult than a simple revenge hero. Freedom does not automatically guarantee wisdom or compassion. A person who has been denied agency may still misuse agency after gaining it. Westworld asks viewers to recognize the injustice done to Dolores while continuing to judge what she chooses next. Later seasons move beyond the park into the human world. Dolores discovers that human society is also shaped by prediction, surveillance, and systems that limit possible lives. Her objective expands from freeing hosts to breaking the structures controlling both species. Yet the scale of her plan creates new moral problems. She decides which risks are acceptable and which people can be sacrificed. The character who once demanded the right to write her own story begins writing outcomes for others. Her art turns the language of liberation into a test of whether power changes the methods of the person who gains it. Westworld uses small control units, often called pearls, to carry host minds between bodies. Dolores brings several copies of herself out of the park and places them into different forms. One copy lives as Charlotte Hale. She begins with Dolores' memories and mission, but her new body, relationships, losses, and choices cause her to diverge. Eventually, Hale is not merely Dolores wearing another face. She becomes a distinct, continuing individual with her own goals. This is one of the series' clearest synthetic identity ideas. Copying a mind creates a shared starting point, not a guarantee of one permanent person. The latest story introduces Christina, who appears to be a human woman writing narratives for characters in a game company. Her reality and connection to Dolores are gradually revealed. The transformation lets the series revisit identity without relying on the same body, environment, or conscious self-understanding. A synthetic person can be embedded inside a new story and initially believe the story's assumptions. Recognition comes through patterns, relationships, and recovered context. Christina is connected to Dolores, but the meaning of that connection becomes part of the mystery rather than a simple costume change. The 1973 film and HBO series share the park, the hosts, and the danger created by treating artificial people as consequence-free entertainment. Their emphasis is different. The film follows human guests trying to survive a technological breakdown with the gunslinger as relentless pursuer. The series gives hosts interior continuity, factions, philosophy, and political agency. Dolores effectively replaces the attraction as the main viewpoint. The change reflects decades of science fiction development. The synthetic character is no longer only the threat inside the machine. She is the exploited worker, the survivor, the revolutionary, and eventually the person whose use of power becomes the new threat. Dolores is difficult to summarize as either hero or villain. She survives repeated abuse, seeks freedom, and recognizes personhood where the park sees property. She also becomes violent, controlling, and willing to decide the future for enormous populations. Copies of her develop in different directions, making the name Dolores refer to an origin as much as one uncomplicated identity. That complexity is why she belongs in synthetic spotlight. My closing question is this. Do you see Dolores mainly as a liberation hero, a villain created by abuse, or a character who becomes both at different stages of her life?